It's a deeply disorienting thing when someone who once withdrew from you, who perhaps vanished into the silence of their own emotional fortress, suddenly reaches out, ding, a message, a simple hey, or how have you been? And the reflexive part of you, particularly if you're anxiously attached, wants to leap. When an avoidant ex reaches out, it's easy to interpret the message as a sign that they've changed, that they've finally realized your worth, or that they're ready to repair the damage. But that assumption is often a projection of your hope, not a reflection of their intent. To truly understand what's happening, you need to examine the psychology behind avoidant attachment and what motivates their behavior when communication is reinitiated. Avoidantly attached individuals tend to withdraw from intimacy when it becomes overwhelming. Emotional closeness threatens their sense of autonomy, so they build walls, sometimes subtly, sometimes abruptly. But here's the paradox. They still experience longing, just not in a way they know how to handle healthily. So when they reach out after a period of silence, it's often not because they've developed the capacity to meet you in emotional intimacy, but because something inside of them has become uncomfortable enough to prompt the ping. Sometimes it's guilt, not necessarily guilt about losing you, but guilt about how they handled things. Avoidants often struggle with unresolved shame. They know they hurt you. They know they disappeared. And when they sense your silence, especially if you've initiated no contact, it creates an unfamiliar void. That void, ironically, can trigger their anxiety. They may wonder, do they hate me now? Or did I really lose them? And rather than face those questions directly, they send a text, a breadcrumb, something non-committal that allows them to check in without truly checking back in. Other times, they're driven by loneliness or emotional regulation. Avoidants often rely on internal strategies to manage emotions, but those strategies have limits. When the distractions fade and they're left alone with their thoughts, they start to feel discomfort. That's when you might get a, hey, just thinking of you, or hope you're doing okay, not because they're prepared to reconnect, but because they're trying to offload the intensity of their internal state. And yes, sometimes they're curious. They want to know if you've moved on, if you still care. But curiosity is not commitment. Don't confuse the spark of interest with the fire of transformation. Most avoidants text not to re-enter a relationship, but to relieve themselves of a feeling. That's a crucial distinction. You are not receiving an invitation to heal the relationship. You are witnessing an attempt to soothe their discomfort. Understanding this changes everything. It puts you back in the driver's seat. Because when you stop assuming their text is about you, you can start seeing it for what it is, a mirror of them. And in that moment, you must ask, do I respond to this breadcrumb with the energy of the old me, still hungry for connection? Or do I respond, if I choose to respond at all, from the strength of the person I've become? The truth is, avoidants reach out not to build a bridge, but to test the waters. Whether you let them back in or let the waters stay still is up to the clarity you bring to that moment. Before you even think about responding to an avoidant ex who suddenly reaches out, the very first thing you must do is become acutely aware of your own emotional reaction, not just on the surface, but deep down, in the nervous system, in the subconscious, in the place where attachment wounds live. Because the truth is, your reaction is not just about the message, it's about what that message represents. When an avoidant ex texts you after silence, your body often reacts before your brain does. Your heart might race, your stomach might drop, you might feel a surge of hope, confusion, longing, or even panic. This is your nervous system being reactivated. It remembers the abandonment, it remembers the distance, and yet it also remembers the fantasy, the hope that maybe now things will be different. If you don't stop to witness this internal chaos, you're likely to respond not from clarity but from compulsion. This is the exact moment when many people sabotage their healing. They reply too quickly. They say too much. They try to reopen a door that was never fully closed, because they haven't paused long enough to ask, why am I feeling this way? You need to understand this. Your emotional reaction is information. It's a map. It reveals your unhealed wounds, your unresolved hopes, and the unmet needs that still echo from the past. If their message makes you feel validated, that's a red flag, not because validation is bad, but because it shows how much power you're still giving away. If a single text can change your emotional weather, you haven't reclaimed your center yet. This is not about shaming yourself, it's about protecting yourself. You deserve to respond, not react. You deserve to approach this moment not from a place of emotional hunger, but from inner wholeness. And that only comes when you sit with the discomfort long enough to understand it. So here's what you do. Don't reply right away. In fact, don't even draft a message. Instead, put the phone down, breathe, notice the physical sensations in your body. Journal. Ask yourself, what am I hoping this text means? What would I want from them if I'm honest? And most importantly, have they shown any sign that they're capable of giving that to me now? If the answer is no, then your emotional reaction is not a sign to act. It's a sign to reflect. You must become the observer of your emotional state, not the servant of it. Because once you see your reaction clearly, you gain the power to respond from self-awareness rather than from old wounds. Remember, emotional regulation is not detachment, it's mastery. And when you can witness the storm inside you without getting pulled into it, you reclaim your agency. That's the first true step toward healing and toward making choices that actually serve your worth. When an avoidant ex suddenly appears in your life again, perhaps after weeks or months of silence, it's tempting to see their message as a lifeline, a sign that they finally see your worth, that the pain meant something. But before you respond, before you even consider letting them back into your emotional world, you need to ask yourself, who am I now compared to who I was when they left? And this is where the real work begins, because far too often people respond to their avoidant ex from the exact same place of disempowerment that existed during the relationship. They reply from the wound, from the fear of being alone, from the hunger to feel chosen. But if you respond from the place they left you are not responding as your healed self. You are responding as the abandoned self. And that's the version of you they already know how to dismiss. You must reclaim your value before you engage. That means remembering who you are outside of their perception of you. It means cutting through the illusions you built during the relationship. Illusions that told you their avoidance was your fault. That if only you had been less needy or more patient, they would have stayed. It means seeing clearly for the first time that your worth was never the issue. It was their capacity that was limited. Avoidant individuals are often emotionally unavailable, not because others are unworthy of closeness, but because they are terrified of it. They associate intimacy with engulfment. So when you tried to love them, they felt cornered. When you tried to get closer, they pulled away. That dance had nothing to do with your value and everything to do with their fear. Internalizing their distance as a verdict on your worth was never fair. It was never accurate, but it was deeply human. To reclaim your value now is to recognize that the version of you who was willing to contort yourself for their affection no longer runs the show. You are not here to audition for their love again. You are not here to prove your worth to someone who didn't see it the first time. When your avoidant ex reaches out, their message will rarely come with clarity or directness. It might be a vague, hey, a casual, how have you been? Or even something completely mundane like, I saw this and thought of you. And here's where most people stumble. They either overanalyze the message or inject it with the emotional weight they are carrying. But what you need to do in that moment is very specific, very intentional. Mirror their emotional tone, not their fear. Avoidantly attached individuals are often emotionally distant for a reason. They grew up in environments where vulnerability was unsafe, unpredictable, or punished. So they learn to suppress their emotional expression. When they do reach out, it's often awkward, hesitant, restrained, not because they feel nothing, but because feeling too much overwhelms them. So their texts are often a test, not of you, but of safety, of whether it's safe to be seen again. But make no mistake, that fear is still present. You can sense it in the ambiguity of their tone. Your task is not to meet that fear with fear of your own. That's what most people do. They either mirror the anxiety by responding to emotionally pouring out feelings, asking for answers, demanding closure, or they mirror the avoidance by being cold, guarded, or sarcastic. Both responses are rooted in reactivity, not power. Instead, what you must do is match the tone without matching the wound. If they're calm, be calm. If they're neutral, be neutral. If they're slightly warm, meet them there, but don't exceed it. Don't try to force the conversation somewhere deeper than they're ready for. This is not about being passive. It's about being composed. You are showing them that you're capable of emotional regulation, of staying present without being pulled back into the old patterns. And that's powerful because avoidants are not used to people responding from centeredness. They're used to being chased or punished. So when you reply with clarity, without emotional volatility, it disrupts the script. It signals that you are no longer trying to win them or reject them. You are standing in your sovereignty. You are communicating with emotional intelligence. This doesn't mean you play games. It means you understand emotional pacing. You respond in a way that says, I'm open to conversation, but I'm not surrendering my peace to have it. You keep your responses measured, thoughtful, and grounded. That's how you mirror tone, not fear. And most importantly, you protect your own emotional center, because the moment you try to draw more intimacy out of their message than they put into it, you tip the balance. You step into fantasy instead of reality. And you abandon your grounded self in pursuit of connection. So when they reach out, whether timidly, awkwardly, or distantly, breathe. Match the temperature. Keep your heart steady. Let your message reflect who you are now, someone who doesn't chase, doesn't freeze, and doesn't react from the wounds of the past. You are the calm and the chaos. And that's what changes the dynamic entirely. When an avoidant X breaks their silence, the emotional temptation to dive back in, to reconnect, to understand, to find closure is incredibly strong, especially if you've spent days, weeks, or even months replaying the breakup in your mind, trying to make sense of their emotional distance. But this is precisely the moment where many people sabotage themselves. They rush into either intimacy or closure too quickly, hoping for resolution, and both moves can backfire hard. Understand this, avoidants do not come back with a roadmap. They rarely show up with clear intentions, and even more rarely with emotional preparedness. When they text, it's often exploratory. They're dipping their toe in the water, not jumping in. If you greet that tentative outreach with intensity, whether it's longing, frustration, or an urgent need for answers, you risk recreating the exact pressure they ran from in the first place. People with avoidant attachment tend to fear emotional overwhelm. So when you push for a deep conversation too early about what went wrong, what they feel, or what you need, they often retreat again. It doesn't mean your needs are invalid. It means the timing of those needs is crucial. Your desire for closure or emotional clarity is completely human, but it must be tempered with patience and self-control, because what you want is authentic connection, not forced confession. And intimacy? Don't rush that either, emotional or physical. Sometimes in the glow of recontact, people rush back into vulnerability, imagining that everything is back on. They become overly accommodating, emotionally exposed, even physically involved before the foundation has been rebuilt. But intimacy without clarity is a trap. It makes you feel close but without direction. You may feel seen for a moment, only to feel discarded again when they pull back in confusion. So what do you do instead? You go slow. You engage from the present, not from the desperation of the past. You don't bring up deep emotional topics in the first message. You keep things light, clear, and grounded. You observe. Are they consistent now, or are they still ambivalent? Are they curious about your life, or just looking to soothe their own guilt or loneliness? Are they taking steps toward you, or simply orbiting? Closure, if it comes, will not come from a single conversation. It will come from a series of consistent actions. Deep end the moment they reappear, because the goal isn't just reconnection. It's real connection. And that only happens when you refuse to rush what needs to unfold slowly, honestly, and consciously. When your avoidant ex reaches out, everything in your body might scream, finally, they see me, they miss me. It meant something. And in that instant, you risk handing over all your power again. Because if you're not careful, you will fall back into the old dynamic where they set the pace, they hold the emotional leverage, and you respond in hopes of being chosen. That's why the most important move you can make when re-engagement begins is this. Hold the frame. You are the prize now. Now let's be clear. This isn't about arrogance or playing hard to get. This is about reality. In the time since the breakup, you've been through the fire. You've had to sit in silence, feel the absence, rebuild yourself from the ground up. If you've done even a fraction of the inner work, evaluate, not pursue. You watch their actions, you pay attention to patterns. You don't assume that every breadcrumb is a trail back to love. You recognize that your time, your peace, your energy are valuable, and if someone wants access to them again, they have to earn that privilege. This is what avoidants don't expect. They're used to being the one who distances, the one who holds the emotional high ground. They're used to being chased because their withdrawal creates scarcity. But when you stop chasing, when you stop jumping through emotional hoops, when you meet their message with calm self-worth instead of emotional hunger, the script flips. Suddenly, they're not in control of the narrative anymore. You are. And that's not about domination. It's about alignment. Because someone who wants to truly reconnect with you should be meeting you as you are now, not as the version of you they last